emblazoned with a pentagram, was dipped in her blood and signed on her forehead. Her habit was hiked up. Her foundation garments were lowered. She was penetrated with something. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And there she died. It's ritual, you know. She had to be alive for the sacrifice. So a person is strangled to the point of unconsciousness. The blood has to flow. That we know our belief in the importance of the blood of the Lamb and how it continues to flow in us. Always an inversion of the sacred. Well, it was 1980, so there was no DNA abilities, technology at that time. The case ran cold. When the case was reopened in 2006, he eventually went to trial in the case was reopened in 2003. The case finally went to trial in 2006, and the priest chaplain, Father Gerald Robinson, was convicted of the murder. Perfectly sane, but was part of a satanic cult that was alive and active in Toledo, Ohio in the late 70s and early 80s. And you want to say, okay, tell me, how did that happen? How did that happen? And as if to add insult to injury, he said her funeral mass.
Oh.
He's now probably about 75 years old by now and in prison. And very good chance that he will die there. He was just, as I said, tip of the iceberg of a whole underground reality of law enforcement people, pediatrician, another now defrocked priest who had access to an orphanage where there was child sacrifice. But isn't there a part of this that just says, that's unbelievable? And that's what gives it its cover. Because we just simply want to dismiss it and excuse it away, to say that can't be real. That can't happen. Modern times, modern age. Who believes in something like that?
Mm-hmm.
I apologize for the graphicness of it, but it's real. It's real just as much today as it was in 1980. Mm-hmm. These things happen. Occult involvement. You know, it's fun, comical, if you will, in talking do a fair share with teens and the like, and kind of public confessions come out in the course of, you know, just talking about these topics and the reality of evil and all of these types of things. And so whether they realize it or not, public confessions come about, you know, and all of a sudden the hand goes up and says, well, Father, you know, what if somebody played with a Ouija board, you know? Would that person become possessed? And I said, well, I don't mean to disappoint you, but probably not. If it's a one-time thing. The majority of these kinds of things go back to what I originally was saying. It's a relationship. Many people in their lives have done one-time kinds of things, to go to a tarot card reader, to go to a psychic or a medium, and all of these kinds of things. Is it advisable ever? No. Do people do it? Yes. What's the simple remedy for it? The sacrament of penance. The problem comes in when that becomes
habit,
a pattern, when that becomes a regular means in a person's life, rather than placing their trust and their faith in God and Jesus Christ in God's providence that He has a plan for each of us, seeking special knowledge, seeking hidden knowledge, basically committing idolatry, placing something else in the place where God belongs, establishing a relationship with something other than God, the occult. Finally, the third, and I seem to be seeing more and more, and Father Gary can maybe speak to it himself, and that as far as people who have experienced some kind of trauma or have been abused. Either way, when I speak of, let me clarify that when I speak of trauma, I'm talking about people that have witnessed something, been exposed to something. They see a violent crime, they see a suicide or come upon a homicide, whatever the case may be, something that traumatizes them to the core of their being. Or if they themselves are abused on some level, emotionally, psychologically, physically, sexually, verbally, whatever the case may be, emotionally. In either of these situations, and for all medical health professionals, we know it's traumatic. It's not something that's ever going to be erased or roll away, but God willing, the person is able to find the means and the tools to help them to grow through it, to heal through it, to work their way through it. Medical professionals, mental health professionals, spiritual healers, in the sense of clergy, of prayer and healing ministry, whatever the case may be. That's the hope, is that they move towards healing and eventually are what has become a wound becomes a strength ultimately in their life. But we also know that there are those who can't, who don't, who become trapped, who become enmeshed in either the trauma or the abuse, whatever it is. And as a result, begin living in the dark emotions that surround all of those things, the resentment, whatever it is, the resentment, the anger, the retaliation, the bitterness, all of those different kinds of things. And the wound never heals. And it scabs over maybe, but the wound is still there. And it runs deeply. Again, it's one more place, just like the other places I've mentioned, where it becomes a doorway. The evil one has to have something to hang his hat on. He cannot stay where he is not welcome. He has to have something to cling to. So these three are the most obvious, at least in my own experience and repeatedly throughout my own ministry. Along with this, and as a big piece for a lot of people, and in fact I'm doing a whole talk tomorrow afternoon on it, is the inability to forgive. Big piece in a lot of people's lives. That there too they become trapped. Not wanting to forgive, not willing to forgive, holding a grudge. I don't want you to think me impious or disrespectful in any way, because I'm sure many of you good and holy people have wonderful images standing on your desks, staring at you, images of our Blessed Mother of the Saints, of the Crucified. I've got a statue that stands a little taller than this cup of water, and it's a caricature of Jacob Marley. You know, Jacob Marley from Scrooge, from Ebenezer Scrooge. He was the one that was sent to warn Ebenezer about the pending visits of the three ghosts to visit him on Christmas Eve. And Jacob is standing there, as you remember, as I say, a caricature, with his head bound with the death cloth to keep his mouth shut, and all the shackles, all these chains in this little statue. And I look at it every day, and it gives me good reflection on what are the things that I am binding myself by. It's a good reflection for us every day. What are the things? What are the old resentments? What are the old angers? What are the old desires for revenge, for unforgiveness, the things that we don't shackle the other person. You know, the kicker is, if we really thought about it, the people that have hurt us, have wounded us, have wounded those that have come to us, they've gone on with their lives. And I hate to say it, they don't much even ever think about us, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
But we've stopped living. We've shackled ourselves and chained ourselves. All the chains that we forge in our lives that shut us down, that block God's grace. Does God want to provide us and shower us with His grace? Always. Do we stand and block it and frustrate it and stop it at times? You bet. Each night before you lay your head on the pillow, think about it. Think about a little image of Jacob Marley. Watch the movie. All you need to watch is the first 10 minutes of the movie, and you can turn it off. Jacob makes that first appearance right at the beginning of the show, all shackled and screaming and begging that Ebenezer Scrooge make a change in his life. Don't do it to yourself. I hate to say it, no one is worth ending your spiritual journey for, let alone your physical life, but your spiritual journey. It's a good way to examine yourself at the end of the day. Let me briefly, I got a couple minutes yet. So all of these things, the pattern of sin, occult involvement, trauma and abuse, in all of these things, but especially in the area of the occult, but at any point when we have begun a relationship, or somebody who comes to us has begun a relationship with the darkness, with the evil one. Of course, the evil one is going to assure them and demand of them and do his best to continue to reinforce. You can't break that. We've made a deal. It's binding. And along with everything else the evil one says, that's a lie. As long as there is life, as long as there is grace, anyone can break the relationship with the darkness. Unfortunately, what happens with people who have endured things or have not found relief or haven't known where to find relief, they become entrenched. Tunnel vision. And the evil one likes that and keeps them fixated on the darkness. They've lost their orientation to the light. And therein lies the work for all of us, to reorient them to the light, to refocus their gaze. Even it's like the capricious puppy we are, to get them to focus again on the light. And it may take days and weeks and months and even years of prayer, depending upon how deep the relationship is, depending on how deep the evil is rooted. But God's grace is sufficient. Always. The sacraments are sufficient. Prayer. All of these means restore that orientation. Let me close by referencing the two favorite tools in my estimation of the evil one. The first is fear. So many of our people live in fear. When's the last time you saw fear walking down the street? Where does the majority of fear live? I realize there are genuine phobias, things that are deeply rooted in people's psyche and the like. But as much as the evil one can, he loves to fan fear